I handed my son the envelope with steady hands, but inside, my heart was drumming like thunder. Gregory's fingers fumbled as he tore it open, his wife Tanya leaning over his shoulder, her perfume thick enough to choke on. The paper crinkled in the silence of my cabin, and I watched his face drain of color, watched his jaw go slack like someone had cut the strings holding it up. What the hell is this? His voice cracked on the last word. I folded my hands in my lap, the same hands that had changed his diapers, packed his lunches, signed every permission slip and report card for 18 years. It's my welcome, I said softly. Tanya snatched the paper from him, her manicured nails flashing red in the afternoon light streaming through the cabin windows. Her eyes darted across the page, once, twice, 3 times, like she couldn't believe what she was reading. This can't be legal, she hissed. It's perfectly legal, I replied. I had 3 lawyers review it. Gregory's face had gone from white to red now, that vein in his forehead pulsing the way it used to when he didn't get his way as a teenager. But he wasn't a teenager anymore. He was 63 years old, standing in my cabin, realizing for the first time that his mother wasn't the doormat he'd spent the last 5 years walking on. My daughter Ellen sat frozen in the corner chair, her hands gripping the armrests so hard her knuckles had gone white. She looked at me with eyes that held something between horror and understanding, like she was watching a car crash in slow motion and couldn't look away. "Mom, you can't do this to us," Gregory said, but his voice had lost its edge. Now it just sounded desperate. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't happen all at once. It's slow, like water wearing down stone. You don't notice it until one day you wake up and realize the foundation you built your whole life on has crumbled to dust beneath your feet. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. I thought about Arthur then, my husband of 42 years, gone 3 years now. I thought about the last thing he said to me in that hospital bed, his hand cold in mine. "Don't let them take everything, Maggie. Promise me." I'd promised him, but I didn't understand what he meant until it was almost too late. Gregory dropped into the chair across from me, the envelope falling from his hands to the floor. Tanya was pacing now, her heels clicking against the hardwood like a metronome counting down to something terrible. "There has to be a way to fight this," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. "You could try," I said, picking up my cup of tea with hands that no longer trembled. "But you'd lose. And you'd spend whatever's left of what you took from me on lawyers who'll tell you exactly what mine already did." Ellen finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, what did they take?" I looked at my daughter, my youngest, the one who'd always tried to keep the peace, who defended her brother even when she shouldn't have. "Everything," I said. "They took everything." The silence that followed was heavy enough to suffocate. Outside, a bird called from somewhere in the pines that surrounded my little cabin, the one I'd bought with money they didn't know existed, in a town they'd never thought to look for me in. Gregory's hands were shaking now as he bent to pick up the envelope, reading it again like the words might change if he just stared at them long enough. They wouldn't. I'd made sure of that. "It's my welcome," I repeated, softer this time. If you've ever been underestimated, stay till the end. This story will remind you that quiet justice can speak louder than anger. Arthur used to say, "I loved too much." Not in a mean way, but in that gentle voice he'd use when he was trying to tell me something important without hurting my feelings. We'd be sitting on the back porch of our old house, the one on Maple Street with a swing he built himself, and he'd take my hand and say, "Maggie, sometimes you give so much of yourself there's nothing left for you." I never understood what he meant. Not really. How could you love your children too much? How could you give too much to the people you'd brought into this world? Arthur would just smile that sad smile of his and squeeze my hand tighter. We met in 1979 at a church picnic. I was 21, wearing a yellow dress my mother had made, and he was 23, fresh out of trade school with oil under his fingernails he couldn't quite scrub clean. He asked me to dance even though there wasn't any music playing, just the sound of kids laughing and someone's radio playing softly in the distance. "I don't hear any music," I'd said, teasing him. Then we'll make our own, he'd replied. That was Arthur. Always finding a way to make something out of nothing. We got married 6 months later in that same church, and I wore my mother's wedding dress taken in at the waist. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and back then that felt like everything. Gregory came first, in 1981. A difficult birth that left me weak for months, but Arthur was there every step of the way, changing diapers and heating bottles at 2 in the morning. Ellen followed 3 years later. Easier this time, a quiet baby who rarely cried. Arthur loved them both with everything he had, worked double shifts at the auto shop to give them things we never had growing up. But somewhere along the way, Gregory changed. Or maybe he was always that way, and I just didn't want to see it. He was smart, ambitious, always talking about business deals and investments, and making something of himself. Arthur would listen patiently at the dinner table while Gregory went on about his plans, but I'd catch that look in my husband's eyes sometimes. Worry, maybe. Or recognition of something I was too blind to see. One night, maybe 10 years before Arthur got sick, we were getting ready for bed. Gregory had just left after dinner, talking about some real estate venture that was going to make him rich. Arthur sat on the edge of our bed, taking off his work boots slowly, like each one weighed 100 pounds. "Maggie," he said, not looking at me. "You see the way he looks at things?" "What do you mean?" "Like everything's got a price tag. Like everything can be bought or sold." I'd laughed it off, told him he was being too hard on our son. Gregory was just driven, just wanted to succeed. What was wrong with that? Arthur looked at me then, really looked at me, with those brown eyes that had seen me through 40 years of marriage. "One day, Maggie, even love will test you." I didn't know what he meant. I pulled back the covers and climbed into bed, and we didn't talk about it again. But those words stayed with me, floating in the back of my mind like a warning I couldn't quite hear. 3 years later, Arthur was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctor said 6 months, maybe less. Arthur made it 8, fighting every day, but in the end, the cancer won. It always does. The day before he died, he gripped my hand so hard it hurt. "Promise me," he whispered, his voice barely there. "Don't let them take everything." "Who?" I'd asked, but I think I already knew. He didn't answer, just closed his eyes and squeezed my hand one more time. I learned later that day arrived sooner than I ever imagined. Do you believe love can blind us to betrayal? Comment your thoughts below. Ellen was always the sensitive one, the one who cried at commercials and brought home every stray cat in the neighborhood. She married young, at 22, to a man named David who worked construction and treated her like she was made of glass. They had 2 kids, lived in a modest house 40 minutes away, and Ellen called me every Sunday without fail. Gregory was different. He married late, at 38, to Tanya, a woman 15 years younger with sharp eyes and sharper ambitions. They had no children, claimed they didn't want any, that kids would interfere with their lifestyle. I never said it out loud, but I was grateful. I couldn't imagine Tanya as a mother. After Arthur died, Gregory stepped up. That's what everyone said. Look at Gregory, taking care of his mother. What a good son. He helped me with the funeral arrangements, dealt with the insurance companies, sat with me while I signed papers I couldn't focus on through the tears. I was drowning in grief, and he threw me what I thought was a lifeline. "Mom, let me handle this," he'd say, pushing another document across the kitchen table. "You shouldn't have to worry about all this legal stuff right now." I signed. Of course I signed. He was my son, my firstborn, the boy I'd rocked to sleep and nursed through fevers and taught to ride a bike. Why wouldn't I trust him? Ellen would come by with casseroles and clean my house while I sat in Arthur's chair, unable to move, unable to think. She'd hold my hand and cry with me, and I'd think about how different my children were. Gregory with his business suits and important phone calls, Ellen with her flour-dusted hands and worried eyes. 6 months after Arthur died, Gregory sat me down. It was a Tuesday afternoon, I remember, because that was the day I usually went to the cemetery. Tanya was with him, perched on my couch like a bird about to take flight, her red nails tapping against her phone screen. "Mom, we need to talk about your finances," Gregory said. I blinked at him, confused. What about them? Well, with Dad's life insurance and the estate, there are some things we need to reorganize. For tax purposes. Tax purposes. I didn't understand tax purposes. Arthur had always handled that. I'd kept the house, raised the kids, managed the day-to-day. But the big financial stuff? That was his department. What do you need me to do? I'd asked. Gregory smiled. That smile I'd seen 1,000 times, the one that used to make my heart swell with pride. Just sign a few papers. I'm putting everything into a trust. It'll protect your assets, make sure you're taken care of. Tanya looked up from her phone long enough to nod. It's really for the best, Margaret. You don't want to lose everything to taxes. So I signed. More papers. More documents with words I didn't understand. Gregory was my son. He was protecting me. That's what I told myself. Ellen called that night like she did every night back then. How are you doing, Mom? Gregory stopped by today. He's helping me with some financial planning. There was a pause on the other end of the line. What kind of planning? Oh, I don't know, honey. Tax stuff. He said he's setting up a trust. Another pause, longer this time. Mom, did you have a lawyer look at anything? I don't need a lawyer. Gregory knows what he's doing. I heard Ellen sigh, soft and sad. Okay, Mom, if you're sure. 2 years passed. I stayed in my house on Maple Street, the one Arthur and I had bought in 1982. I tended my garden, went to church on Sundays, visited Arthur's grave every Tuesday. Gregory came by once a month, always with papers to sign, always with that reassuring smile. Mom, you trust me, right? He'd ask. Of course I do, sweetheart. He'd slide the papers across the table. Just a few more documents. Maintaining the trust, updating beneficiaries, that sort of thing. I signed. Every time I signed. The documents that would steal my future were already in his hands. Hit that like button if you've ever trusted someone who turned around and broke your heart. I found out on a Thursday. Not from Gregory, not from any lawyer or accountant. I found out because the bank called to tell me my account had been closed. I'm sorry, what? I'd said into the phone, thinking there must be some mistake. Your account, Mrs. Brennan. It was closed 3 months ago. All funds were transferred to the Brennan Family Trust. My hands started shaking. But I didn't close my account. The woman on the other end of the line spoke slowly, like she was talking to a child. According to our records, the trust administrator handled the transfer. A Mr. Gregory Brennan. I hung up without saying goodbye. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst right through my chest. This had to be a mistake. Gregory was managing the trust, yes, but he wouldn't just close my account. That was my money. Mine and Arthur's. I called Gregory. He didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. On the 3rd try, Tanya picked up. Margaret, hi. Gregory's in a meeting right now. I need to talk to him. The bank just called. Oh, about the account transfer? Yeah, that's all part of the trust restructuring. Gregory meant to tell you. It's more efficient this way for tax purposes. There it was again. Tax purposes. Those 2 words I'd heard 100 times but never really understood. Tanya, where's my money? A pause. It's in the trust, Margaret. It's protected. You don't need to worry. I want to talk to Gregory. He'll call you back when he can. He didn't call back. Not that day, not the next. A week later, he showed up at my door with coffee and pastries from the bakery I liked, all smiles and casual energy. Hey, Mom. Sorry I haven't called. Work's been crazy. I stood in the doorway, not letting him in. What happened to my bank account? Oh, that. Yeah, we moved everything into the trust. It's safer that way. Plus, it qualifies you for some senior benefits you weren't getting before. I want access to my own money, Gregory. His smile didn't waver. You have access. Through the trust. I can cut you a check whenever you need anything. I want my own account, Mom. He put his hand on my shoulder, gentle, like he was calming a nervous horse. You're 78 years old. Do you really want to deal with managing accounts and paying bills? Let me handle it. That's what I'm here for. Something cold settled in my stomach, but I pushed it away. This was Gregory. My son. He was trying to help. What about the life insurance? I asked. Arthur's policy. It's all in the trust. Everything's protected, Mom. You don't have to worry about anything. He left after 20 minutes, kissing my cheek and promising to take me to lunch next week. I stood in my living room, surrounded by 40 years of memories, and felt the ground shift beneath my feet. Ellen stopped by that Sunday. She took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. What happened? I told her everything. The bank account, the trust, Gregory's reassurances that made less sense the more I thought about them. Ellen listened, her face getting paler with every word. Mom, I think you need to talk to a lawyer. Gregory said. I don't care what Gregory said. Ellen's voice was sharp, sharper than I'd ever heard it. This doesn't sound right, but I didn't call a lawyer. Not yet. Because calling a lawyer would mean I didn't trust my son, and I wasn't ready to admit that. Not out loud. Not even to myself. 2 months later, Gregory and Tanya showed up unannounced. They walked through my house like they were seeing it for the first time, pointing at things, whispering to each other. I made tea and tried to ignore the knot in my stomach. Mom, Gregory said, settling into Arthur's chair like he owned it. Tanya and I have been talking. This house is getting too big for you. I'm fine here. You're 78. The upkeep alone, the yard, the repairs, the utilities. It's too much. Tanya leaned forward, her voice sticky sweet. We've been looking at some really nice retirement communities. Places with activities and nurses on staff. You'd love it. I'm not going to a nursing home. It's not a nursing home, Gregory said quickly. It's an active senior community. Very upscale. I'm staying in my house. Gregory and Tanya exchanged a look. The thing is, Mom, the house is part of the trust too. And Tanya and I have been thinking about renovating it. Updating it. Maybe turning it into a rental property. The income would help support your care at the community. The room started spinning. What are you talking about? It's all just paperwork, Mom. The trust owns the house now. Has for about a year. I stared at my son, at the man I'd given birth to and raised and loved, and I didn't recognize him. You took my house. I'm managing your assets. There's a difference. That night, while I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized something Arthur had tried to tell me years ago. My own home no longer belonged to me. Stay with me. You'll see how a quiet woman's heartbreak turns into power. They came back 3 weeks later with brochures. Glossy pages full of smiling old people doing yoga and playing cards, with names like Sunset Gardens and Golden Years Estates. Tanya spread them across my kitchen table while Gregory talked about square footage and amenities like he was selling me a vacation package. This one has a beautiful courtyard, Tanya said, tapping a manicured nail against a photo. And they do movie nights every Friday. I looked at the brochures but didn't touch them. I said no. Mom, be reasonable. Gregory's voice had an edge now, the patience wearing thin. You can't handle this upkeep. The roof needs replacing, the furnace is 20 years old, the yard's becoming a jungle. You're not capable of maintaining this place anymore. I've been maintaining it just fine. Have you? He gestured around the kitchen. When's the last time you painted? Or had the gutters cleaned? Or fixed that broken step on the back porch? Arthur used to fix those things. Arthur used to climb ladders and patch holes and keep everything running smooth. But Arthur was gone, and I couldn't do it alone, and Gregory knew it. I'll hire someone, I said. With what money, Mom? Gregory leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Everything goes through the trust, remember? And I'm not approving expenses for a house that's falling apart when there's a perfectly good solution right here. He tapped the brochures. Ellen had warned me this was coming. She'd called 2 days ago, her voice tight with something that sounded like fear. Mom, David heard Gregory talking at some family thing. About selling the house. You need to do something. What can I do? Get a lawyer. Please. But I still hadn't. Because getting a lawyer meant admitting my son had become someone I didn't know. Someone I needed protection from. Tanya stood up and started walking through the house, opening drawers and closets like she already owned the place. We'll need to clear out a lot of this stuff anyway. Most of it's junk. That's my life you're calling junk. She turned, gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I didn't mean it like that. I just meant you won't need all this at the community. They come furnished. You just bring clothes and personal items. Gregory checked his watch. We need to make a decision, Mom. The house needs work, and we can't let it sit here deteriorating. Either we renovate and rent it, or we sell. But you can't stay here anymore. You're not safe. I'm perfectly safe. Are you? He raised an eyebrow. What if you fall? What if there's a fire? What if something happens and you can't get to a phone? Every question was a nail in a coffin I didn't want to see. Ellen checks on me. Ellen has her own family to worry about. We sat in silence for a moment, the kitchen clock ticking away seconds that felt like hours. Tanya was upstairs now. I could hear her footsteps in the bedroom Arthur and I had shared for 42 years. You can't handle this upkeep, Mom. Gregory said it gently this time, like he was delivering bad news I should have already accepted. I looked at my son and saw a stranger wearing his face. When do you need an answer? We're meeting with a contractor next week. I'd like to tell him we're moving forward. Next week. 7 days to give up everything Arthur and I had built together. 7 days to let them erase 40 years of memories like they'd never happened. That night, after they left, I sat in Arthur's chair and cried until there were no tears left. Then I got up, walked to the bedroom, and pulled out the old suitcase from the back of the closet. The one we'd used for our honeymoon to Niagara Falls in 1979. I packed slowly. A few changes of clothes. Arthur's watch. Our wedding album. The letters he'd written me when we were dating. My mother's jewelry box. Everything I couldn't bear to leave behind fit in one bag. At 2 a.m, while Gregory and Tanya slept comfortably in their king-sized bed 40 minutes away, I walked out of the house on Maple Street for the last time. I didn't leave a note. Didn't say goodbye. I just locked the door, put the key under the mat where Ellen would know to find it, and drove away. That night, while they slept comfortably at home, she vanished without a word. Would you have stayed or walked away? Tell me what you'd do in her shoes. The pawn shop on 5th Street didn't ask questions. The man behind the counter, gray-haired and tired-looking, just weighed my mother's silver tea set and named a price. It wasn't what the pieces were worth, not even close, but it was cash in my hand, and that's what mattered. You sure about this? He asked, wrapping each piece in newspaper. I nodded. I was sure about nothing except that I needed to disappear. Over the next 2 weeks, I sold everything I could. My mother's china. The antique clock Arthur's parents had given us as a wedding gift. My grandmother's pearl necklace. Each piece felt like cutting away a part of my past, but the past had already been stolen from me. At least this way, I could choose what to let go. I'd been staying at a motel off Route 40, the kind with weekly rates and no questions asked. The room smelled like cigarette smoke and cheap air freshener, but it was mine. Nobody knew where I was. Not Gregory, not even Ellen, though that part hurt worse than I wanted to admit. My phone rang constantly those first few days. Gregory's name flashing across the screen again and again. Then Tanya's. Then numbers I didn't recognize, probably lawyers or people from the trust. I never answered. Just watched the phone light up and go dark, light up and go dark. Ellen left voicemails. Mom, where are you?
Please call me. I'm wedded.
Her voice cracked on the last word, and I almost called her back. Almost. But Ellen would try to fix things, try to bring everyone together, and I was done being fixed. I spent my days on the motel room laptop, searching. Searching for places where nobody knew my name, where the cost of living was low, where I could start over. I changed my name legally back to my maiden name. Margaret Brennan became Margaret Walsh again, like I was 21 and meeting Arthur for the first time at that church picnic. That's when I found the listing. A cabin in Willow Creek, Montana. 1 bedroom, wood-burning stove, 2 acres of pine trees. The description said, perfect for widows seeking peace. I read that line 10 times. Perfect for widows seeking peace. Like someone had written it just for me. The price was exactly what I'd managed to scrape together from selling my life piece by piece. I called the number, spoke to a woman named Ruth who owned the property. Her voice was kind, no nonsense, with a slight western drawl. "It's remote," she warned. "Nearest town is 8 miles. Gets cold in winter. You'd be alone out there." "That's what I need." She was quiet for a moment. "Running from something or running to something?" "Both." "Fair enough. When can you get here?" I drove for 3 days straight, stopping only for gas and coffee and a few hours of sleep in rest stop parking lots. The farther west I went, the lighter I felt, like I was shedding weight with every mile. By the time I crossed into Montana, I could breathe again. Willow Creek wasn't even a town, really. Just a general store, a post office, and a diner that looked like it hadn't been updated since 1975. The kind of place where everybody knew everybody, except nobody knew me. Ruth met me at the cabin with the keys and a casserole. "Welcome home," she said, like I'd been expected all along. The cabin was smaller than it looked in the photos, but it was perfect. Wood floors that creaked when you walked. Windows that looked out onto nothing but trees. A porch where I could sit and not hear anything but wind and birds and silence. That first night, I sat on that porch with a cup of tea and Arthur's letters in my lap. I hadn't read them in years. Couldn't bear to after he died. But now, in this place that was just mine, I opened the first one. "My dearest Maggie," it started. "I know I'm not good with words like you are, but I needed you to know that loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done." I cried reading those letters. Cried for the man I'd lost, for the children who'd betrayed me, for the life that had crumbled like old paper in my hands. But somewhere in those tears, I felt something else. Something that felt almost like hope. I drove through Willow Creek and whispered, "Arthur, I think I found it." If you believe new beginnings can rise from heartbreak, tap that subscribe button. The cabin smelled like cedar and wood smoke, and every morning I woke up to silence, so complete it felt like the world had reset itself overnight.
No phones ringing.
No Gregory showing up with papers to sign. No Tanya walking through my house like she already owned it. Just me and the pine trees and the mountains in the distance turning pink with sunrise. I planted a garden that spring. Tomatoes and lettuce and herbs, things that were easy to grow and didn't need much attention. My knees hurt when I knelt in the dirt, and my back ached when I stood up, but it was a good kind of pain. The kind that came from building something instead of watching it get torn down. Ruth from next door, well, next door being 2 miles away, checked on me every few weeks. She'd show up with fresh bread or jam she'd made, stay for coffee, never ask questions I didn't want to answer. That's how I learned Montana hospitality was different from anything I'd known back east. People left you alone but made sure you weren't lonely. I read more than I had in years. Books from the tiny library in town, mysteries and romances and biographies of people who'd lived bigger lives than mine. At night, I'd sit by the wood stove with Arthur's watch in my hand, running my thumb over the worn leather band, and read until my eyes got heavy. Ellen called sometimes. I'd finally answered after 3 months. Couldn't bear her worry anymore. "Mom, where are you?" "I'm safe. That's all you need to know." Gregory's losing his mind. He filed a missing persons report. "I'm not missing. I just don't want to be found." She was crying now. Did he really do what David said? Did he take everything? Yes. A long pause. "I didn't know, Mom. I swear I didn't know." "I believe you, honey. Come home. We'll fix this. We'll get lawyers. I am home." I hung up before she could argue. Changed my number the next day. It hurt, cutting that last thread to my daughter, but Ellen couldn't help without pulling me back into a life I'd escaped from. The guilt came in waves. Late at night mostly, when the cabin was dark and the wind howled through the pines. I'd think about Ellen's kids, my grandchildren, who I hadn't seen in months. I'd think about the house on Maple Street, wonder if Gregory had renovated it yet, or if it sat empty, full of ghosts. But then morning would come, and I'd make coffee and sit on the porch and watch deer graze in the clearing, and I'd remember why I left. Sometimes saving yourself means disappointing people who think they know what's best for you. I started writing in the afternoons. Nothing fancy, just thoughts and memories in a journal Ruth had given me. Stories about Arthur, about the kids when they were small and still mine, about the woman I used to be before betrayal taught me the difference between kindness and weakness. One entry said, I spent 78 years being who everyone needed me to be. Maybe these last years can be mine. Summer turned to fall. The aspen trees went gold, then bare. I learned how to chop wood and stack it for winter, how to winterize pipes and seal windows against the cold. Ruth taught me to can vegetables from my garden, rows of jars lining my pantry like soldiers standing guard. I hadn't felt this capable in years. Maybe ever. November came, cold and sharp. Snow dusted the mountains, and the cabin required more maintenance. I hired a local teenager to help with the heavy work, a quiet kid named Jesse, who reminded me of Gregory before he got hungry for things that didn't matter. One evening, I was reading by the fire when my phone rang. The new number I'd only given to Ruth and the general store. Unknown caller. My hand hovered over the screen. Something in my chest tightened, some instinct that whispered danger even before I knew what it was. I answered. Hello. Silence. Then breathing. Then a click. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Wrong number. Telemarketer. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, that the peace I'd built was about to shatter. 2 days later, someone knocked on the cabin door. The sound broke the silence I'd fought for. Stay with me, because who's at that door will change everything. I knew before I opened the door. Maybe it was intuition, or maybe I'd been waiting for this moment since the day I drove away. Either way, my hand was steady on the doorknob. Gregory stood on my porch, Tanya beside him, both looking out of place in their city clothes and polished shoes. Behind them, sitting in a rental car with Montana plates, was Ellen. Her face pale, eyes red like she'd been crying. Mom. Gregory's voice was different.
Softer.
The voice he used to use when he wanted something. We've been so worried. I didn't move.
Didn't invite them in.
Just stood in the doorway, like a fence between my old life and new one. How did you find me? Does it matter? Tanya said, her smile brittle. We're just glad you're safe. Ellen got out of the car slowly, like she was walking to her own execution. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't want to tell them, but Gregory said you might be in danger, might not be thinking clearly. I'm thinking clearer than I have in years. Gregory looked past me into the cabin, and I saw it happen. Saw his eyes calculate square footage and property value and potential profit. This is nice, Mom. Really nice. Must have cost a fair amount. That's none of your business. Actually, it is. He pulled out his phone, started tapping. See, the trust still holds all your assets, and any major purchases need to be approved by the administrator. That's me. So technically, this cabin was bought with trust funds without authorization. My heart started pounding, but I kept my voice level. I didn't use trust funds. I used my own money. You don't have your own money, Mom. Remember? Everything was transferred. Tanya was looking around now, her sharp eyes taking in the porch, the garden, the 2 acres of pine trees. This would have been perfect for the kids, she said absently, like she was talking about a vacation rental.
You don't have kids, I said.
Gregory's nephews. Ellen's boys. This would have made a great family retreat. Something cold settled in my stomach. They weren't here to check on me. They were here to take this too. Ellen stood at the bottom of the porch steps, tears streaming down her face. Please, Mom. Can we just talk? All of us together. I looked at my daughter, at the daughter who'd never stood up to her brother, who'd chosen peace over truth every single time, and I made a decision. Come in. I was expecting you. Gregory's eyebrows shot up. You were? I stepped aside, held the door open. I've been expecting you since the day I left. They filed in, Gregory first, always first, needing to lead even when he didn't know where he was going. Tanya followed, her heels clicking on the hardwood. Ellen came last, moving like someone walking into a trap. The cabin was small, so we all ended up close together. Too close. I could smell Tanya's perfume, the same expensive scent she'd worn the day they tried to put me in that nursing home. Gregory settled into the chair by the fire like he owned it, like he'd owned Arthur's chair, like he owned everything I'd ever loved. Nice place, he said again. Isolated, though. Aren't you lonely?
No.
Mom, you can't just disappear like that. His voice shifted, took on that edge of irritation. We had to file reports, hire investigators. Do you know how much that cost? About as much as you stole from me, I'd imagine. The room went quiet. Tanya stopped examining the bookshelf. Ellen froze halfway to the couch. Gregory's face darkened. I didn't steal anything. I managed your assets. There's a difference. Is there? He stood up, started pacing. The cabin was too small for his energy, his anger. You signed everything over. You agreed to the trust. I have the documents. I signed what my grieving widow's heart trusted my son to handle with honesty. I did handle it honestly. I protected your money, invested it, made sure you wouldn't lose everything to taxes and bad decisions. And put it all in your name. The trust's name. With me as administrator. That's how trusts work, Mom. I walked to the small desk by the window, opened the drawer, pulled out an envelope. The same envelope I'd been carrying with me since the day I left, the one I'd prepared for this exact moment. Sit down, Gregory. Something in my voice made him stop pacing. Made him look at me like he was seeing me for the first time in years. I handed him the envelope with steady hands. He opened it, his fingers fumbling with the paper. Tanya leaned over his shoulder. I watched their faces drain of color, watched understanding dawn, and then denial, and then fury. What the hell is this? I folded my hands in my lap, the same hands that had changed his diapers and packed his lunches. It's my welcome. Comment, Justice, if you think their visit won't end the way they expect. The cabin felt smaller with all of us inside, the air thick enough to cut with a knife. Gregory's hands were shaking as he read the document again, like the words might change if he just focused hard enough. They wouldn't. I'd made sure of that. This can't be legal, Tanya said for the second time. It's perfectly legal, I replied, my voice steady as stone. I had 3 lawyers review it. Montana lawyers this time, not the ones you recommended. Ellen stood frozen by the door, her face pale. Mom, what is it? What did you do? Gregory crumpled the paper in his fist. She filed a lawsuit. Against me. Against the trust. Claiming elder abuse and financial exploitation. The words hung in the air like smoke. Ellen's hand flew to her mouth. You manipulated a grieving widow, I said calmly. You isolated her from her finances, took control of her assets, and attempted to force her into a care facility she didn't need. There are legal terms for that, Gregory. Words like coercion and undue influence. I was helping you. His voice cracked. I was protecting you. From what? From having my own bank account? From living in my own house? From making my own decisions? Tanya snatched the paper from Gregory's hand, smoothing it out. This is insane. You can't prove any of this. Actually, I can. I pulled out another folder from the desk. I have copies of every document Gregory had me sign. I have bank statements showing the transfers. I have recordings of conversations where you both discussed selling my house without my consent. Gregory's face went from red to white. You recorded us? Montana is a one-party consent state. I only needed my permission. Ellen finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. When did you do all this? The day I left, I contacted Ruth's daughter. She's a paralegal in Billings. She helped me find lawyers who specialize in elder financial abuse. We've been building the case for 8 months. Gregory started pacing again, his hands running through his hair. This is going to destroy me. My reputation, my business. Like you destroyed my life? I didn't destroy anything. I was managing your money. You were stealing it. My voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath. And if we go to court, the judge will see every transaction, every forged signature, every lie you told while I was too heartbroken to notice. Tanya's mask cracked. What do you want? Money? You want us to pay you back. I want what was mine. Arthur's life insurance. The house on Maple Street. The accounts you emptied. Every penny you took while calling it protection. That's impossible, Gregory said. The money's been invested, tied up in properties. Then you'll sell the properties. Liquidate the investments. I don't care how you do it. But you have 30 days to return everything you stole, or this lawsuit moves forward. The silence that followed was broken only by the crackle of the fire. Gregory collapsed back into the chair, his head in his hands. Tanya stood behind him, her sharp edges finally dulled. Ellen was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face. Why didn't you tell me, Mom? I would have helped you. Would you have? I looked at my daughter, at the woman who'd spent her whole life trying to keep peace in a family that didn't deserve it. Or would you have tried to mediate? Tried to find a compromise? Tried to convince me that Gregory meant well? She didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because we both knew the truth. I'm not the same woman I was when I left, I continued. I'm not the doormat you could wipe your feet on. I'm not the confused widow who signed whatever you put in front of her. I rebuilt myself in this cabin, and I'm not giving that up for anyone. Gregory looked up, his eyes red. You're really going to do this? Drag your own son through court? Destroy your family? You destroyed this family the day you decided I was worth more to you as a bank account than as a mother. Tanya grabbed her purse. We need to call our lawyer. Call whoever you want. But the deadline doesn't change. 30 days, or the lawsuit becomes public record. And Gregory, honey? I waited until he looked at me. Every news outlet in the state will want to cover the story of the successful businessman who stole his widowed mother's entire life savings. They left 10 minutes later. Gregory couldn't even look at me. Tanya was already on her phone, probably calling lawyers, calculating damage control. They got in the rental car and drove away, leaving Ellen standing on my porch. Why did you bring them here? I asked. He said you were sick. That you weren't thinking straight. He had papers from a doctor claiming you were mentally unfit. She pulled a tissue from her pocket, wiped her eyes. I thought I was saving you. By leading them to the one place I felt safe? I didn't know, Mom. I swear, I didn't know about the money, about the house. I thought he was helping you. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. But Ellen had always chosen to see the best in people, even when they showed her their worst. I think you should go, I said quietly. Mom, please. I need time, Ellen. Time to figure out if I can trust you again. She nodded, more tears falling. Did you ever regret having us? Me and Gregory. The question hit like a punch to the gut. No. I regret not teaching Gregory that people aren't commodities. I regret not showing you that keeping peace isn't the same as doing what's right. But I never regretted loving you. Ellen got in her car without another word. I watched her drive away, watched the dust settle on the dirt road, and felt something break and heal inside me at the same time. It's my welcome, I'd said. Soft and final. Don't leave now. The ending will show what true peace looks like. 27 days later, the money appeared in a new account under my name. Every penny Arthur had left me, plus interest. The deed to the house on Maple Street, transferred back to Margaret Walsh. A notarized letter dissolving the trust and removing Gregory as administrator of anything related to my life. He didn't call, didn't apologize, just sent the documents through his lawyer with a cover letter that said, as requested. I sat in my cabin with the papers spread across the kitchen table, and I waited to feel something. Triumph, maybe. Victory. But all I felt was tired. Ruth came by that afternoon with apple pie and knew better than to ask questions. We sat on the porch and ate pie and watched the autumn leaves turn the mountains into watercolors. You win, she asked finally. I got my money back. That's not what I asked. I thought about it. I don't know what winning looks like anymore. Looks like you sitting here, breathing free air, not having to answer to anybody. Maybe she was right. Maybe winning wasn't about the money or the house or the legal documents. Maybe it was just about choosing myself for the first time in 78 years. Ellen called 3 weeks later. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mom. Hi, honey. I left David. I sat up straighter. What? After everything that happened with you and Gregory, I started really looking at my own life. David's not abusive, but he's controlling. Makes all the decisions, handles all the money, tells me what's best for me just like Gregory did to you. She paused. I don't want to be you, Mom. I don't want to wake up one day and realize I gave away my whole life. Pride swelled in my chest, warm and bright. Where are you now? My friend Lisa's place.
The boys are with me.
We're okay. Do you need money? I need my mom. Something cracked open inside me, something that had been locked tight since the day she brought Gregory to my door. Then come home. Come to Willow Creek. She arrived a week later with 2 teenage boys who looked shell-shocked and a car full of garbage bags stuffed with clothes. I showed them the cabin, apologizing for the size, but Ellen just hugged me and said, "It's perfect." We made it work. The boys slept on air mattresses in the living room. Ellen took the couch, and I kept my bedroom. It was cramped and chaotic, and I'd never been happier. Ellen got a job at the diner in town. The boys enrolled in the local school, small but decent. We planted a bigger garden that spring, all of us working together, and the cabin filled with noise and life I hadn't realized I was missing. One Sunday morning, Ellen and I sat on the porch while the boys slept in. She had a cup of coffee, I had tea, and the world was quiet except for birdsong. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "What you did to Gregory?" I thought about my son, wondered where he was and what he was doing. Wondered if he ever thought about me with anything other than resentment. "Regret is for people who didn't learn," I said finally. "What did you learn?" That love without boundaries is just another word for surrender. That being kind doesn't mean being weak. That sometimes the people you save yourself from are the ones you loved most. I took a sip of tea. And that it's never too late to choose yourself. Ellen reached over and took my hand. Her palm was warm, calloused from work, so different from Tanya's manicured grip. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For showing me what strength looks like." We sat like that for a long time, mother and daughter, watching the sun climb over the mountains. Inside the cabin, one of the boys started moving around, the floorboards creaking with his weight. The coffee pot beeped. Life continued, messy and imperfect, and mine. I never saw Gregory again. Heard through the grapevine that he and Tanya moved to Arizona, started over somewhere nobody knew his name. Part of me mourned the son I'd raised, the boy who'd once brought me dandelions and called them flowers. But that boy was gone, if he'd ever really existed at all. The house on Maple Street sold for more than I expected. I split the money with Ellen, helped her buy a small place in town. The rest went into a trust, a real one this time, with an independent administrator and Ellen as the sole beneficiary after I was gone. Ruth asked me once if I was lonely. I looked around at my cabin, at Ellen's car parked in the drive, at the garden full of vegetables we'd planted together, at the mountains standing guard in the distance. "No," I said. "I'm finally free. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it looks like a 78-year-old woman packing a single suitcase and driving toward a future nobody thought she deserved. Sometimes it sounds like the word no spoken clearly for the first time in decades. And sometimes, if you're lucky, justice looks like peace." I turned 79 in that cabin, surrounded by the people who loved me without conditions. Ellen made a cake. The boys sang off-key. Ruth brought champagne she'd been saving for something special. "What are you going to do now?" Ellen asked as we cleaned up paper plates and plastic forks. I looked out the window at the mountains, at the endless sky, at the life I'd built from ashes and anger, and the quiet determination to survive. "Whatever I want," I said. For the first time in my life, whatever I want. And that, more than any legal victory or returned money, felt like coming home. If this story touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe. Because quiet justice deserves to be heard, and your engagement helps these stories reach others who need to hear them. Turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story, and leave a comment below about a time you chose yourself over someone else's expectations. Your story might inspire someone else to find their own freedom. Thank you for being part of this family, and remember that it's never too late to reclaim your life.